here in England and Ireland. Can everyone hear me okay? Excellent, very good. So as yesterday, I'll begin the afternoon with a few more reflections, continuing the themes that we've been exploring during this time together. One of the things I've been pointing out is how with the development of insight, we see that the experience of our lives, our mind, and the world around us is all taking shape, is all known here within the space of our awareness. So one of the teachings that the Buddha gave about this is a short sutta I like to emphasize and encourage people to reflect upon, is where the Buddha defines what he means by the world. So when we use the word the world, we tend to think of the planet Earth, or maybe even the physical universe. But the Buddha changes the perspective on that. It's a very phenomenological perspective. So if that's not a too unfamiliar term for people. So what he says is that whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world, that is called the world in this teaching and this discipline, in this Dhamma. And what is it whereby one is a perceiver of the world and a conceiver of the world? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. That's the means, the medium whereby one is a perceiver and a conceiver of the world. So what he's saying is the world, the only world we can meaningfully speak about is the world of our own experience. What we, I can't know what you're seeing and hearing. When I have a particular visual impression and I say, that's red, I don't know what you're seeing when you perceive that color and say, that's red. And if you're red-green colorblind, you might be pointing at something that I would call green, and you say, that's red. So what this means is that the Buddha took this very, as I said, phenomenological perspective, that we can only meaningfully talk about the world of our own experience. And that's what we can study, and that's what we can understand, we can know. We can't put ourselves into a totally objective position. That's not possible, according to the Buddha's teachings. But rather, we can only talk about what we know through our own conditioning, through our language, our experiences, our senses. You know, if one amongst us is blind and can't see, then words like red and green have no meaning. If you've been blind since birth, red, green, blue, they have no meaning, because there's no perception of that. So that when we consider things in this way, I would say it's a very important aspect of developing wisdom, not just because of being able to keep your own perceptions in a context and recognizing, oh, well, this is not the truth, this is my mind's version of the truth. So then it helps us to keep a humility, really, a perspective on our own opinions, our own judgments, and so what we call good or right or beautiful, somebody else might see it very, very differently. And but also there's a social effect as well, insofar as if I'm aware that what I call beautiful or good is only seen that way from my perspective, then it helps me to appreciate that other people can see things differently. That just because I see it as something that's beautiful or delicious doesn't mean to say that anybody else will as well. So I feel this is a really significant teaching in many, many ways, both helping us to say develop a humility, a kind of a lack of conceit about our own opinions, our own perspective, our own judgments, but also it helps us to get along with each other more effectively, because you can genuinely appreciate that just because I call this this beautiful and or delightful, somebody else might have a very, very different experience. And so we find space in our heart to acknowledge that our experience is not the truth, or not the fact, but the way that our mind puts it together and frames it and calls it, say, according to our own particular conditioning. So I feel it's a simple teaching, and it's a very short sutta in the Pali Canon, but it's extremely impactful because it really brings things home. I mean, how much difficulty and struggle do we find in our lives, clashing with other people in the workplace, with the family, in the society around us, because of having different perspectives. One set of people say, "Oh, this is really good." Another set of people say, "That's awful, that's terrible, how can you do that?" And then because of attachment to our own perspectives and thinking, well, I see it this way, therefore that's right and good, and if other people think differently, then they're wrong, then necessarily you're going to have a clash. So if we can recognize, well, this seems right and good to me because of this, and this reason, but these other good people, they have a different perspective. And so let's find out why they think that way, or how come they see it that way. Let me listen to them and find out where they're coming from. And it's also a feature that you find in the Pali Canon, that even when the Buddha encounters people who have radically different perspectives from him, or really strange or even kind of destructive points of view, he'll still speak to them and of them very politely. Like he'll say, this good person is possessed of wrong view. There's a kind of gentility or politeness, even when he's saying, pointing out that someone's perspective has got some serious problematic features of it, that as he can see it. So that's one of the aspects of the development of wisdom, I feel, is very important. If you reflect on that, the world that we know is our mind's version of the world. And it's not just a matter of having a particular set of information or even a background. The very language that we use, the structure of verbs and nouns and pronouns and adverbs and adjectives, which we might take totally for granted as being a way of accurately representing the world, just that the language that we use has got its own impact of creating limitations and judgments that we're not aware of. And that I remember the many years ago when I did a psychology degree, when I was studying psychology of language, one of the most significant people that we studied was an American psychologist called Benjamin Worf, W-H-O-R-F. And he started life as an insurance assessor. And he got interested in the psychology of language because he went to go and check up on this petrol station where they'd had an explosion. And so he asked, well, how did the explosion happen? And then talking to one of the workers there at the petrol station, who fortunately had survived, he said, well, we were excavating this old tank, this old big petrol tank underneath the pumps. And so I saw that the tank was empty, and I was smoking a cigarette, so I just tossed my cigarette butt into this empty tank, and then there was this huge explosion. And so he said, that's interesting, because it was empty of the liquid petrol, but it was filled with fumes. So he said, you call it empty and you think throwing a cigarette butt in is safe. If you had the thought it's filled with petrol fumes, therefore it's liable to explode, so don't have any kind of naked flame or anything burning anywhere near it. So that led to a change of career for Mr. Worf, and he bailed out of the insurance business and picked up the psychology of language instead. So the reason I mention these kind of things is that most often we think that we're experiencing the world. I'm not reading anybody's mind, or I haven't I don't use these cameras to spy on you in the everyday flow of life, but this is how we are as human beings. We automatically and unconsciously think that our judgments are accurate, the way we talk about things is reliable, that we are unbiased, and the kind of people who sign up for a Buddhist meditation retreat over a weekend will probably feel themselves to be very, humanitarian, friendly, and sort of even-minded. So I feel it's helpful to recognize, even with the best of intentions, the way that the mind frames the world and expresses itself is heavily conditioned, and that the part of the development of wisdom and the use of insight meditation is to get a perspective on that. And so even things that not even language, even things like numbers, you think, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. What's debatable about numbers? But you talk to again, you talk to philosophers or mathematicians, or even linguistics, people in linguistics, and they'll say the same thing. Well, what is a number? When you talk about one, in the last century, Alfred North Whitehead and Bertrand Russell spent years and years putting together a sort of a thorough tome, a very sort of thorough and comprehensive tome called Principia Mathematica. They were trying to prove all the basic principles of mathematics from scratch, and just defining things like 1 and 0, and 1 + 1 = 2. Took hundreds of pages just to define what the number 1 means. Like 130 pages just to define oneness, and but yet even then, with the best of intentions, it's still not an absolute fact. And a few years after that was published, I think in 1913, an Austrian logician called Kurt Gödel came along, and he basically proved the first noble truth on the basis of logic. And he published a paper called Undecidable Propositions in Principia Mathematica. And he showed that no matter how hard you try to prove a fact like, what is 1, or what 1 + 1 = 2, you can't make an absolute proof. There's always going to be something incomplete or imperfect. And so I thought it was a very interesting way within the field of mathematics and logic that Sabbe Sankhara Dukkha, all conditioned things are unsatisfactory. So what this means is that we can get a perspective on our conceit about our own rightness and what we think is true, is absolute, and our own sense of say, fixity of opinion, and that again, we might think that we're very flexible, adaptable, and kind-hearted, compassionate people. But I just watching my own mind after over all these years, it's startling how frequently you realize, oh my goodness, I didn't realize how English I was until I went to live in Thailand, or when I went to live in California. I was just saying to somebody this morning that I thought I was a very kind of liberal, outgoing, expressive type of Brit, but then going to live in California, where you meet somebody and they give you a lot of their life history within the first 10 minutes of meeting them, and when you say, well, how are you? They'll actually tell you how they're feeling. If they're having a bad day, they'll let you know. And if you come from the southeast of England, if you say, how are you? Say, oh, fine. That's as much as you get. We invented the stiff upper lip down here. And so I didn't realize how English I was until I went to live in California. So there's many aspects of our own conditioning and the way the mind frames the world that we're really unaware of. And so this kind of development of insight and the use of reflective wisdom is a wonderful tool for getting a perspective on that and to challenge our own assumptions, our own fixity. And so what it does, it makes us far more adaptable and flexible in our relationships, in our attitudes, and basically it reduces the number of things we get upset about, which I suspect most of us will be very happy to do, that we can get irritated or upset or anxious about many things. But when we are able to look upon our own judgments, our own opinions, our own perceptions with a greater degree of caution, as it were, a greater degree of flexibility, with not taking such a rigid stance upon our experience, then we find ourselves far more open and able to genuinely attune to the people around us, the events that happen, and you know, like with the pandemic and the lockdown and the inability to travel. This kind of spiritual training really equips us very, very well for adapting to changes of circumstance of this kind. So that this, I feel, is a very fertile, very helpful area to develop. So another of the themes I thought to pick up on from speaking about, you know, earlier today, I was talking about the Buddha's the kind of undefinable quality of the Tathagata, that saying, you know, as that passage I quoted from the dialogue between the Buddha and Vacchagotta, where he said, you know, that the material form, the body or feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness, whereby someone trying to define the Buddha, trying to define the Tathagata, would define them, has been completely dropped. So that quality of letting go of those familiar landmarks, or those familiar sort of ways that we frame who and what we are. There was a very helpful teaching that Ajahn Chah would give on this same kind of theme, and he would, drawing upon the Dhamma teachings, he would ask people, when people would come to visit him at his monastery at Wat Pah Pong, sometimes he would ask the question, if you can't go forward and you can't go backwards and you can't stand still, where do you go? You can't go sideways either. And so, and he would put this kind of a conundrum, a puzzle to people, just to get them to be looking at their life, their mind in a different way. And they might say, well, can you climb a tree, Luang Por? No, you can't climb a tree, can't dig a hole, can't go forward, can't go backwards, can't go sideways, can't climb up a tree or dig a hole. Where do you go? You can't go forward, can't go back, can't stand still. So as long as and then he would see how people would respond, and people would come up with different answers or just be confused. Tell me what the answer is, Luang Por. So it's a helpful theme for reflection, because as long as we conceive sort of who and what we are, or what we are in terms of identity, in terms of time and place, then there's no solution to that puzzle. You can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't stand still. You know, it's like, if we conceive that what we are is this individual entity living in this particular physical spot with this particular time, there's no solution to that conundrum. It's only when the mind lets go of identification with place, with time, with identity, with personality, when those qualities are dropped, then the conundrum is resolved, I would say. So that when we have our clearest moments, usually in meditation, and that's the attachment to personality or to thought or to feeling, to sensation, that's been dropped or has been let go of, then in that moment, you know, the mind is awake, but you can't really say that it's anywhere. Awareness doesn't really apply. Time doesn't apply. The Dhamma is timeless. It's always now. It's always here, and that the insight into not self also applies. So, yeah, we can say that, yeah, this is my mind, or this is where I am. But as I was saying earlier, that these ways of talking about this life or this experience as a person, as an I, a me, or a mine, these are convenient fictions. So if you take that little conundrum, if you can't go forward, you can't go back, you can't stand still, where do you go? The only way that can be resolved is letting go of self, letting go of time, and letting go of location. And then that leaves the mind awake and aware, but with a quality of undefined being. And again, this is another way of approaching or appreciating that Buddha mind, or the quality of the Tathagata, that awake, aware quality that's not definable in terms of the familiar attributes of body and mind, what we call the five khandhas, or the five aggregates. So that I feel is a very, Ajahn Chah was a genius at coming up with these very relatable ways of say, reshaping the way that we look at our lives and our experience. So that's a helpful thing to consider, to ponder. And so it's a question not looking for a clever logical answer, but it's what it's doing is it's a skillful means to let go of those habits of identification with the body, with time, with geographical location, and to see that the mind, isn't really anywhere. Awareness only applies to physical form. Now we can, there is no, you can't really say the mind is anywhere. Awareness doesn't really apply. We can say, well, I'm in Amravati and Elaine is in her village near the Sunyata, and Paul is in the shrine room at Sunyata in the shadows with Ivan. We are in these places, but that, again, I would say that where does the mind stop? Where is the mind in the head? Does it go beyond the head? How big is the mind? How small is the mind? Smallness, bigness, awareness doesn't really apply. So talking in this way, it's not just a mind game or a way of just sort of playing with words or ideas, but it's a specific spiritual tool. It's a way of changing up the habits of perception, because it's through identification with the body and the personality in particular. That's the very first obstacle to enlightenment, what we call Sakkaya Ditthi, self-view. That's sort of number one on the list of obstacles to enlightenment. So that letting go of identification with the body and with personality, that's the sort of that's the gateway to liberation, and that insight meditation, the development of wisdom, that's how that gateway is entered. So what they call the 10 the 10 fetters, the samyojana. Number one is self-view, and you can summarize that as I am the body, I am the personality, that's who and what I am. So it's getting a perspective on that and learning to let go of that, and to not replace that with a different I am, but to have that courage and that resolution to let go of those habitual identifications of being a woman, being a man, being old, being young, being tall, being short, with our nationality, our personal story, to not be suppressing that or rejecting that, but just realizing, well, that's a set of perceptions, and those perceptions don't have any absolute fundamental quality or essence. They are a set of perceptions that arise and pass away, just like the sound of these words or the patterns of pixels on our screens. They arise, they take shape, they cluster together in particular forms, and then they dissolve. There's no thing really and absolutely there. So that the development of insight and the perspective on the body, on the personality, and learning to let go of that through vipassana meditation, then there is it's not a rejection or a suppressing. There's in a way, we all have to acknowledge and know the conditioning that we have. Myself, as a British person growing up in Southeast England, as a male, as a Theravada Buddhist monk, from the forest tradition, these particular attributes, they have their effect. But if I think that, and so they need to be received and honored and known, and in that form, but it's also important to know them for what they are, that they can only be patterns of nature, like the shape of a cloud, or the sound of a word, or the ripple on a pond. There's no absolute essence fundamentally there, I would say. And so that it's not a matter of trying to negate who we are, or our conditioning, or our age, or our name, or our story, or our family, and so on, but rather knowing that and seeing through it, like seeing the transparency of the conditions and who and what we call ourselves, that yes, I'm a man, but masculinity is only part of the picture. It's only a particular way of talking about a certain configuration of experiences. That's all. It's not an absolute reality. My name, I've got a lot of different names. Well, what's my name? A couple of years ago, I got given a new one, which is Raja Buddhi Varaguna. It's a really long one. So most of you know me as Ajahn Amaro, and so I've had many names in the past. So what's my name? A name is just a collection of sounds and letters to denote a certain entity, a certain being. But there isn't anything absolutely there. Like before July of 2019, I didn't have the name Raja Buddhi Varaguna, and then I got given it. So boom, suddenly I have to remember it, learn how to spell it. So so actually some of the Sangha members here didn't even know that I had that name, which is quite fun. They gave me a teapot with the name written on it. Anyway, so that when we are reconfiguring and developing that appreciation of the transparency of our conditioning, our body, our mind, our personality, then we're not trying to just replace that with a different set of attachments, but to train the heart to live with that quality of what we can call undefined being. And again, for many of us, that's really frightening. We want to be something. How many of us, when we've had a job that was really demanding and that came to an end, we think, oh, finally that's over. Thank goodness for that. Or we get through our list of emails that need replies, or we finally finish the refurbishing of the flat. Oh, thank goodness that's over. How long does it take before you start to look for something else to be worried about or annoyed about? I mean, I'm not reading anybody's mind. It's just how we are as human beings. Even just doing the spring cleaning or tidying the place up. Oh, thank goodness the dishes are all washed, the floor's hoovered, the dusting's been done. Right, you can plunk yourself down on the sofa, and then 1, 2, 3. Usually before about 5 or 10 seconds, you start to look for the next thing to be worried about, to be engaged with, right? Again, I'm not reading anybody's mind. We don't like to not be anything, even if it's, oh my goodness, I got 10 more emails to respond to. Something in us is, oh dear, I got that as well. But part of us is like, yes, me, got something to do. So we create arguments, we create anxieties, we create plans and projects to feed a sense of defined being, because we don't like in terms of the habits of self-view, we really don't like that feeling of undefined being. That's kind of ego death, I would call it. So a lot of the practice is to do with not being afraid of those ego deaths, as I was saying earlier today, to know that's part of the picture, to letting go of those that sense of definition of me with a problem, me with a plan, me with an unrequitable love, me with a vengeance that needs to be exercised. I must have revenge. I can't rest until I've paid them back for what they've done to me. That even if it might be a problem or seems stressful or painful, something in us loves that because it gives us a sense of identity. So it takes a lot of courage to let go of that and say we don't need to be anything, which is not being sort of passive or just vacant or numb, but rather I would say it's being free and being responsive to the time, the place, the situation, the people that we're with, and not just building our life and our activity around chasing that sense of defined being, just so that we'll feel like we're something. That it's a powerful driving force in the lives of many people, if not most people in the world, particularly in the Western world, that looking for something to be and then putting a huge amount of energy and effort into that. So to be at ease with that quality of being awake, being aware, and not being anything, that takes a lot of effort. So when Lumpur Sumedho would talk about the development of the insight into Four Noble Truths, often he would emphasize with the third noble truth, the ending of dukkha, he would often make more he would highlight that, he would make more emphasis on that than the other aspects of the Four Noble Truths, because that ending of dukkha, that needs to be realized. So when that difficulty, that problem, that the dukkha is ended, then in Satchikata Bhanti, it needs to be realized. So leave that space open. Don't just jump in and fill it up with some other thing to be doing and being. That letting that dukkha end and letting that space come alive. Let that space be fully realized. And because if we don't, if that isn't say appreciated, and we allow that quality of undefined being just to blossom, if you like, then the habits will be looking for the next thing to occupy our attention, a thing for me to do and to be, and some quality of defined being. Even having a problem, you know, oh my goodness, that debt I have got to pay off. Something is relieved. We got this thing that's got our name on. So that's the last of the things I'd like to sort of put into the mix for the themes for this afternoon. So we can have a period of sitting meditation now. So please get yourselves as comfy as you can be.